Their business model is to make a killing on this deal. They have to buy that property very deeply.
I don't think that selling property that mom and dad worked all their lives for, 50% of what the value is, doing the best. So yeah, they get it over with and they get it done quicker, but it's not something that I can deal with.
The average real estate agent out here, if the house does not look pretty, they don't know what to do.
The probate process can be scary, it can be emotional, but that's why you have people like us, like you and me, to help them through that.
Because, when the market was really going up, you can kind of bet on the market kind of helping you out, kind of saving you. But in a market that's deteriorating or softer, these judgment calls are harder to make. The less equity there is, the harder it is.
Brett, take time to grieve. Take time to deal with, the initial emotions of the whole process.
If I was selling my house and I wanted the world's best buyer to buy my house, would I not want every buyer on planet Earth to know that it's for sale and that they can call me and make an offer?
I'm glad that I've met you, because I've had clients in that situation that I think would definitely benefit from your guidance and your expertise.
Welcome to the Texas Probate Real Estate Podcast. My name is Jeremy Kritt, owner and broker of Kritt Real Estate and the founder of Texas Probate Real Estate. On this podcast, we like to bring to you people active in the probate space, attorneys, and other service providers that help people going through the probate process. Today, we have a really special guest, Ramon. He is an attorney at law here in the greater Austin area. He's going to share with us his insights into the probate process, and I'm hoping that our listeners and our viewers will be able to get some value as they're going through this process. Jesse, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been really looking forward to this time together. In our pre-show meeting, we were going over a lot of different things, and you have a very interesting background, and I really enjoyed learning more about you, but I want to share that with our audience. Jesse, let's just start with you, the person. Where do you come from? How has your career developed up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, I come from a small town called Menard, Texas. It's a tiny town of about 1,100 people. Grew up there. I was born there. After high school, I spent a couple of years in college and then joined the military for 4 years. Got out, finished my undergrad. Initially, I thought I was going to do something in the medical field, but at some point I realized that wasn't for me. And then since I was a kid, I've talked about becoming an attorney. Even though I was older when I finished college, I said, why not do it now? And so I went to law school, started practicing, was initially practicing in San Antonio. I worked with a small firm that did a lot of business and transactional work for small businesses, nonprofits, churches, and we handled everything from business startups to contracts, employment contracts, employee policy manuals, anything related to, operating a business entity. As part of that, we did estate planning for our clients and got into probate because every once in a while, one of our clients would have a death in the family, and, they liked us. They wanted us to handle, that aspect of their case. And the attorney that I worked with asked me if I wanted to take it on. He said, it can be all yours. You take it from start to finish. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed having the responsibility and autonomy as a young attorney. I didn't see a lot of probate cases, maybe 4 or 5 a year, but I always enjoyed it. One of the first probate cases I handled on my own was my grandfather's estate back in Menard. And, just working with my family to give them the peace of mind to get through that process was very rewarding for me. And so I would take probate cases whenever I could. About 10 years ago, moved to Austin, and I got on with a firm in Georgetown where they did mostly probate and estate planning. So I got a lot of good experience there. And then for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been on my own, opened my own law office where I focus primarily on estate planning and probate. And it's been a good experience. I like the work. I like guiding and navigating the clients through the process. And it's a rewarding practice for me. I enjoy it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's always interesting to hear the background of our guests, and it's amazing how our life story kind of affects kind of how we end up, practicing whatever it is we're doing, whether it's law or real estate. I'm kind of curious, in your background, as it relates to probate cases specifically, are there any specific things, like just from your background, that kind of give you kind of an interesting angle towards some of that work?
Well, like I said, the first probate case that I did was I mentioned my grandfather's case, and dealing with my family in that, that realm, I got to see, how it affects people. It's, for an attorney, you do dozens of probate cases a year, you go through the steps, but this is a lot of times their only probate matter. And they've just lost a loved one and they're going through, the emotions and the grieving. And, it's my job to help them through that and help them, take care of this so they can get on with their lives. And
Absolutely.
that's what's most rewarding for me. Yeah.
Love that. I love that, Jesse. I resonate with that a lot because I know with real estate, typically the real estate asset, the house, is usually the largest asset that they're dealing with.
Yes.
And I have several probate clients now as a broker, real estate broker, and like this is like the last step to get closure in their probate estate, right? Like they're just
Yes.
waiting to liquidate this property
Yes.
so that they can, move on with their life. And I see all of those emotions and sometimes
Conflict.
conflict as
Yes.
well. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's definitely very rewarding helping people through this process. I often consider it an honor and a pleasure to help them through it. Okay, let's move on a little bit into our subject matter. And Jesse, I'm so glad and happy that you've taken the time here to be with us because you bring such a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with the probate process itself. And a lot of the people that are coming into this space, the average, person out there, a loved one has passed away, maybe it was a friend, and okay, there's the initial shock of loss, but then maybe the bills are starting to come in, maybe there's a house, Texas probate real estate, that's what we're, very much involved with. But life goes on, right? The world may not know that the person has passed on yet, right? So the
Yes.
things are starting to pile up. I have found a lot of people in a state of confusion when this happens. It's a little bit unfamiliar territory, as you said. They've probably never gone through this before. What's your advice if someone's watching this and this has just happened to them? Maybe it's their mom, their dad, brother, sister, child. Jesse, I was just at a someone had contacted me, and it was actually the daughter of this gentleman, and the daughter left behind three very young children, single
Hmm.
mother.
Uh-huh.
The house is the only thing really of value in the estate, and it's going through foreclosure, and it's really a sad situation.
Uh-huh.
So, and he's just like, it's like it's very disorienting, right? So there's all these situations out there, but let's just say there's someone out there and they are in this situation. They don't know where to start. What's your advice to them?
Yeah, initially, I mean, just take time, take a deep breath, take time to grieve, take time to deal with, the initial emotions of the whole process. Reach out to an attorney when you're ready. Just gather information if you can. If not, just talk to the attorney first. They'll guide you through what you need to do initially. And it's usually just gathering. I just tell clients, gather as much information as you can about, what property, what assets, what debts. Just find a will if there was a will. If there's not a will, just confirm that there's no will. Just get information first. A lot of times I'll talk to a prospective client. They won't hire me right away. We'll talk. I'll kind of explain what we need to do to get things started. They'll find information. I'll tell them to talk to the other beneficiaries, the other heirs, the other family members, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then come back to me, and then we'll talk about getting the process started. So Texas probate can be a pretty straightforward, simple process, but it can also be a little bit complicated. The more information we get at the beginning, the better off we'll be in the long run. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I have a client now, and the house was kind of a mess, and they were going through so many papers and things, trying to find the will, trying to find all kinds of things. It's very confusing. Overall, like if you were to say, okay, I have the person's like house here. That's the only thing I've got. I'm trying to look for the stuff. What if they can't locate important materials, important documents? What happens then?
Yeah, usually I tell them just, take your time, go through everything. If you can't find it, you can't find it. It's possible to probate a copy of a will. It's possible that, they didn't have a will. You thought they did, but they didn't have it. It's possible to probate an estate without a will. It's a little more complicated, but it's not, nothing crazy. So if they can't find it, they can't find it. Go through the records, go through, ask family members, did you ever know if this person created a will? Did he ever talk about creating a will? And, they'll find out. If there's a will, they'll find it 99% of the time. If not, then we'll have to proceed as if there's no will. But that's the key thing at the beginning, is getting as much information as we can get. So
Yeah. Once they have some of these documents, they start maybe shopping for an attorney. I'm always curious to ask the attorneys that we have on our show, because this is kind of a consumer question, and I'm not sure if a lot of attorneys actually kind of think about it from this perspective.
uh,
But it's kind of like when they're looking for a real estate broker, they're looking for an attorney. What do you think people should be thinking about when they're choosing an attorney for a probate matter?
for probate matter, yeah, I think an attorney that deals maybe not only in probate, but bulk of their practice being in probate, with they have experience. They practice in the area that you are needing the probate case handled. I work in Travis County, Hayes County, Williamson County. I'm familiar with the staff there, so if any issues come up, they'll contact me. It's the same reason I wouldn't handle a divorce case, because I don't, I probably could, but I would rather that a prospective client that comes to me, or family member that comes to me saying, I got a divorce case, I'm not going to handle it. I could probably do it maybe, but I probably wouldn't do it as well as somebody that focuses their practice on divorces or family law. So I think the biggest thing is someone that works primarily or extensively in the probate realm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Right here at my office, there's a guy upstairs, and if I look at his door, he practices every. I could go to him for anything if I look at his door, right? He does immigration, he does tax, he does everything. Kind of jack of all trades. And I understand that some firms, they might have a dedicated person that does divorce, a
Yeah.
special person
Yeah.
that does probate, right? They have
Yeah.
specializations in the firm, but a lot of times there's these one man shops that are just like. They're like, okay, we do everything. What's the potential problem with that? Or have you seen problems? Are you aware of
I've
problems?
seen some problems, and it's again, it's not knowing the process. Probate is a very specific process. It's not overly complicated, but it is a specific process. And I've had clients come to me that had to get rid of their other attorney because they didn't draft filings properly, or they didn't know how to move the case through, or some error happened that an experienced probate attorney would have not done or would have caught. And it just adds time and expense and headache to the client. And yeah, so those are some of the things I see. Yeah.
Jesse, that is a very serious issue. I can tell you, as a real estate broker selling properties in probate, I have seen many situations, let's say,
Mhm.
where the attorney made a mistake and it costed the estate tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
I have seen that. I have seen that. In
Yeah.
fact, there's one case in particular that comes to mind where the attorney had done something incorrect. They fired the firm fired that attorney for some other thing, some other reason or whatever. He left
Yeah.
the firm. They didn't notify the client. Actually, that's something I've actually noticed that happens quite common. It's quite common where it's like a big firm, and they have an attorney handling certain kinds of cases, and they leave the firm, and the clients don't know that they left the firm. They have no idea. They have no idea what's happened. They're wondering later, when nothing's happening, then they're asking questions, and they realize, oh, that attorney doesn't work here anymore. Who knows where the file was? And I've been actually very surprised to learn that is actually quite common. Actually,
Yeah.
I've heard that quite a bit. But the situation I was thinking about in my mind as you were talking was about 2 years ago. I had a client who had this kind of situation, and the attorney left the firm. Another attorney was assigned. I think that attorney messed up on some procedural things. Well, while this was going on, the house was in foreclosure. Basically, it was in a foreclosure process, and by the time I got involved, it was like to the wire. It was to the wire. I was able to sell the property just before the foreclosure auction that's on the first Tuesday of every
Wow.
month here in Texas. And it was really like just last minute, but it did have an effect on the sale because, you know, once it's public that this house is going to foreclosure, it's like people understand, like, okay, this property is in distress, right? So then, people are trying to take advantage of that situation. It's
Mhm.
harder to sell property under duress like that. And it could have been avoided, because had those mistakes had not happened, they probably would have been able to get through that process much sooner, have the authority to sell sooner, and avoid that. And I mean, they could have lost the property entirely, but I do believe that they lost money, serious money because of that mistake that the attorney made, which I think highlights the need for hiring someone like yourself
Yeah. And
that
I think that
actually is doing this.
yeah, and things like that just add stress to the client, and they're already going through a stressful situation, and our job is to, alleviate some of that stress, and things like that can just really, really add to the stress and add headaches to the client, and that's what we try to avoid. Yeah.
Jesse, I want to ask you a question. I think we have a lot in common, actually. You've got your business, the law office of Jesse Ramon,
Yes,
and just you, or there are
it's
multiple
just me.
attorneys?
I'm a
Yeah,
solo practitioner. Yes.
yeah. And so I'm kind of like that too. So I'm a broker. I do sponsor one agent, but I don't have a big, and I'm basically a solo practitioner as well, solo
Yeah.
broker. One of the advantages I think that people, even though we're in different fields, one of the advantages I think we have is that, like, every case, I always tell my clients, when you are dealing with Kritt Real Estate, you're dealing with Jeremy Kritt. Okay,
Exactly.
when you do business with me, you're getting the man. And
Exactly.
you know what? And forgive me, Jesse, I'm going to toot my horn and then I'm going to toot your horn. So you get a guy with, almost 10 years of experience, hundreds of transactions. And guess what? Your file, your transaction, it's my priority. It's my
Exactly.
priority.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
not all this machinery around your
Yeah.
around your transaction. I am dealing with it.
Yeah.
I care about it. Do you feel the same way about
Yeah,
yourself?
absolutely, and clients appreciate that. I'm a small little one-man show,
Yeah.
but clients appreciate when they call me, they're gonna speak with me. They're not gonna speak to the secretary, they're not gonna speak to a legal assistant or they're gonna speak to me, and, the clients that I deal with appreciate that. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is the benefit. That is the benefit that we bring. I really feel that, uh, when I first started my real estate brokerage, at one point, I thought I wanted to have this big thing, and then when I started building, I was like, "I'm not sure if I want to do that." I like having my thing. I like having my clients. I'm doing I've got my own brand. I've got my own stuff going on. I'm okay. I'm okay. I don't need the whole huge apparatus around me. And I always, when I go to appointments and I talk with my clients or my prospects, I'm just like, look, I'm like, I want you to understand something. I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars you would lose if you went with the second best company in town. That's why I'm with Kritt Real Estate. Okay. All right. All right. And, that,
Yeah.
and I think I get that vibe from you too. And I think it's a huge advantage we have to our clients. I really do believe that because, these big, whether it's a brokerage or, and no offense, because what we have had some larger firms on the program, and no offense to them. I just think that it's a differentiation that,
Mhm.
if you want personal service, right? You want personal service, you want that high touch, it's firms like ours that can kind of deliver that at a very high level. Would
Exactly.
you agree?
I agree, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
absolutely. That's awesome.
the clients that I have appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. Going back to probate, you mentioned something that actually I haven't asked a lot of attorneys about, and I actually want to explore it with you a little bit.
Okay.
And that is that you mentioned, okay, I practice in Travis County Court, Hayes County, Williamson County. Can you tell me a little bit about, um, and this is just as a layman in terms of like legal stuff, how important is that? How important is it for you to have, for an attorney to have familiarity in the actual court, like the people
Mhm.
and, the procedures of a particular court? How does that factor in? Because I don't think the average person really thinks about it. They're just saying, "Okay, I'm just going to court," right? Like, they don't think, like, there are maybe differences, regional differences, procedural differences. Can you share a little bit about your insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, Texas probate is basically the same process, but each court handles it a little bit differently, and it's important to know that so that it doesn't delay, going through the process. And it can be small stuff like setting hearings, or some allow you to just submit documents and the judge will sign off. Other counties, you have to appear in person. A few counties still, let you do Zoom. But it's a little bit differences in how they, push the case through. And so knowing that is helpful. It helps get through the process quicker, and becoming familiar with the staff, having a relationship with the staff. It's not just the probate judge; it's staff attorney, it's a court administrator, it's a court auditor. if knowing, if something comes up, they know me. I've dealt with them many times before. Any minor issue, it can be just a minor issue. They'll contact me, and I'll take care of it. And just knowing that, so that you can take care of anything that might come up that's unexpected, and having a relationship with the court, with the staff, is always beneficial, and it just helps the client get through the process.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a benefit. So it's like I might not want the attorney in Fort Worth handling my case in Williamson County, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
might not. That might not be a good idea.
Yeah, and they might charge for travel time, or hourly rates to get down here, and spend
Yeah.
a day of billing when they're just on the road to get to a hearing. So yeah,
You mentioned something interesting that I also want to explore a little bit with you. You mentioned Zoom appearances. I know I have a lot of clients that are out of state that are not it's a burden to travel. What are you finding with the courts in terms of their willingness to do kind of Zoom appointments or Zoom appearances, remote appearances? Is that becoming less
it's
of a thing, or are they just where is the state of that
yeah, I think
currently?
it's becoming less. I know Travis County doesn't do Zoom hearings for probate. They did during the COVID period, obviously. Williamson County doesn't. Hayes County doesn't. Every once in a while, I get a case in Bexar County in San Antonio. I think some of those courts still allow Zoom hearings for uncontested matters. So it's just a matter
Okay.
of getting through the process, filing the documents, getting the administrator or executor appointed, then a Zoom hearing is allowed. But most
What
counties
why do you think that is, Jesse?
I think because getting the person, face to face with the judge, with the attorneys, giving the testimony, it's a process. And, most counties prefer that you do it in person. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess with the testimony, you get more of a sense of the person and like
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
situation is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that
And
makes a lot of
it's
sense.
usually a quick hearing for uncontested matters. And you get plenty of advance notice of when the hearing is going to be. You get to actually pick the date. And the hearing, they usually last 10, 15 minutes. So it's not too big of a burden. So, yeah.
What it looks like when someone first comes to your office, what does that initial consultation look like? And what are the things you're asking them? And what are the kind of tasks and assignments that usually you're giving them?
Sure. Yeah. So if they meet in my office, and I can do a consultation by phone or by Zoom, whatever they're comfortable with. But if they meet in person, they usually ask me what they need to bring. I'll say, if you have a death certificate, bring it. If you have the will, bring it. But the initial meeting is just kind of getting the basic information. When did they die? What county did they reside in? And then did they have a will? If they had a will, who's named as executor? Who's named as the beneficiaries? Is the executor willing to serve? Alive and willing to serve? Who are the other beneficiaries? And then I just ask, do you get along with the beneficiaries? Is there other family members that might create an issue or have problems with anything? And then, I ask, what property do they own? What assets? Are there any debts? Just the basic information that I'll need to get, the initial documents drafted, if they decide to retain me, and get, the probate process going. And a lot of times they don't know, so I said, it's fine. Just get as much information as I can. If I think they're ready to move forward, I kind of explain the process that we're going to be taking, and it depends, if there's a will or if there's not a will, and then we go from there.
Let's say they say we do have a problem. We've got my sister. She's very difficult. What happens then? And Jesse, do you handle litigation? Do
I
you do
don't.
litigation?
I don't handle litigation. No, no. I try
Okay.
to avoid that. Sometimes I end up in the middle of it because it's no, everybody's going to get along. There was no will, but all the heirs are fine, and it turns out that they're not. But I try to avoid it, and that's why I get as much information from, did he have kids? Did he have, other relatives that are going to, make it difficult? And if there's a likelihood that something's going to be challenged, whether it's the appointment of the administrator or the executor, or, the will itself, or, anything like that, then I'll just refer them to other law firm. Yeah.
Would you say the vast majority of cases have real estate attached to them, or is it like what would be the percentage?
In most, probably 90%, 95%. And it's
Got
usually
it.
the biggest asset in the estate is the home, is real
Yeah.
estate. Yeah.
Usually, I'm kind of curious the conversations you might have around the real estate when they meet with you. What are some of the things that you often hear in your office, regarding the real estate
Yeah.
portion?
If there's a mortgage on the real estate, do I have to keep paying, or what happens if, in the meantime, before we get an administrator or an executor appointed, am I responsible? This is mom's house, mom and dad's house, and they're both gone. Am I going to be responsible for paying the mortgage? Will it be foreclosed on if we miss the mortgage payment? Can I sell it, without notifying the other beneficiaries or the other heirs? Just basic stuff on how am I going to handle this, this asset. Yeah, and it's a little scary to clients sometimes. Yeah.
I've been dealing with several clients and prospects that are in this. I'll share one with you that comes to mind that's kind of interesting. And this is where I think I can be very helpful to people, is that I have this, I mentioned it earlier when we started the podcast episode, that there's this one gentleman, he contacted me, and it was his daughter who's the decedent, left behind 3 young children. The only thing really is the property. The property has been vacant for some time now. It has damage now because there was a leak in the roof, and there's some mold here and this and that. There's all kinds of things that have happened due to it being vacant, and it's gone behind. It's gotten behind. The mortgage has gone behind. It's going to take $40,000 to bring it current. Okay. The mortgage is pretty much I mean, there's quite a lot of debt there. There's quite a lot of debt on the house. And he's like, Jeremy, do you think I should pay this $40,000 to save the house so that, I can sell it and get something for these kids? And I did the whole market analysis. I did a very even more in depth than I normally do, just because of the high stakes involved. And I was just looking at it, and I'm just like, well, I told him maybe it depends, right? It depends, because there's a lot of things. He hasn't yet been appointed. The market's deteriorating, especially the sub-market that he's in. And I'm like, when I look at it, it's like there might be $20,000 here, which in real estate, when you're talking about like a sale, that's actually not a wide margin for a real estate transaction, right? Because we're thinking it will sell for this, right? We're thinking it will sell for this, but until it's on the market, we don't know if it's actually going to sell for this. So he's in that dilemma of whether to do it or not. Of course, when someone approaches me for something like that, I'm always happy to help, because there's a lot at stake, and I know that if they're going to sell, I'm sure they'll consider me to sell their property, because I help them. But I was just looking at this, and I was just like, wow, this is really a sad situation, because it is kind of a judgment call. It's like, yeah, there might be 20,000 here, but you might throw in 40,000, end up maybe the court doesn't appoint you. Maybe the market deteriorates further. Maybe the value goes down because this house continues to, we have a big storm and water starts coming in the house again,
Yeah.
So it's interesting how common those situations are, but yet it's so pressing. So like in this case, it's 3 young children. It's the grandfather just trying to, can I get something for these kids? Some of these stories are quite sad.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I do see that a lot. And I'm glad that I've met you, because I've had clients in that situation that I think would definitely benefit from your guidance and your expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ever have anyone like that, just let me know. And I'm really happy to help with that. It's one of those things where it's very, especially in this market, it can be very tricky, because, when the market was really going up, you can kind of bet on the market kind of helping you out, kind of saving you. But in a market that's deteriorating or softer, these judgment calls are harder to make. The less equity there is, the harder it is what the right course of action is. But going back, your consultations and your clients that you meet in your office. So yeah, real estate's a big part of it. Now, I'm kind of curious. As it relates to real estate, because we're Texas Probate Real Estate podcast here, are there any kind of just things that you've seen recently or in the past related to real estate that have kind of maybe threw you off, or problems that you see recurring, or something like that?
Yeah. One thing, I think I mentioned it when we first spoke, is as soon as that probate case is filed, if there's real estate, then the executor that's going to get appointed, the administrator, starts getting these calls, starts getting these mailings from, hey, we can sell this house for you in 7 days and at no cost to you. And I've had a couple of clients that took them up on that, even though I kind of said, let's just kind of go through the process, talk to some real estate agents that might get you a better deal on this. But they went through it, and it just didn't feel right to me. And yeah, so that's one thing that I've seen that doesn't sit well with me.
let's talk about that. I want
Yeah.
to talk about that with you. Okay. So
Uh,
this is very interesting to me. This is a little bit of my war drum. Okay. Just I got my war drums
yeah.
out now because if you go to my website and you look at some of my videos and conversations, I talk about this quite a lot. I talk about this quite a lot. I'm actually very curious to understand why it doesn't sit right with you because you're coming at it from the attorney angle.
Mhm.
So I'm very this is very interesting to me. What are your feelings about it, and what's going through your mind when you've had
Yeah,
these
and
cases?
I think my transactional background from when I, worked with, businesses and I did real estate sales, and also the executives of fiduciary for the estate and for the beneficiaries, and their job is to do the best that they can, and I don't think that selling a property that mom and dad worked all their lives for, 50% of what the value is, doing the best. So yeah, they get it over with and they get it done quicker, but it's not something that I can deal with.
Yeah. So I appreciate you saying this. And this is part of my mission at Texas Probate Real Estate, Jesse. So I was at an appointment yesterday, just to
Mhm,
highlight this. Okay.
mhm,
And they contacted me and I went out and met with them. And they're like, well, we're meeting with everybody. And I said, okay, who are you meeting with? Who are you actually meeting with? And then I identified, okay, so these are quote unquote investors. Okay. And I tried to make the point to this prospect that their business model is to make a killing on this deal. Okay. Their business, they have to buy that to make money. They have to buy that property very deeply,
mhm,
especially in this market. The softer the market, the deeper I have to buy because in my underwriting of that deal, right? I have to have cushion, right? I
mhm,
have to have security in case
mhm,
something doesn't work out. So something costs a little bit more money or the market goes down a little bit further. So there's not a universe, in my opinion, where you're going to do better selling it directly to an investor
mhm.
versus having it on the open market. And on that fiduciary topic, this is something that I always try to stress to people. And you know what? There are good lawyers, there are bad lawyers. Can we agree on that?
Yeah. Mhm,
Okay, right. Okay, there are
mhm.
good lawyers, there are bad. There are good real estate agents, there are
Everything.
bad
Yep.
real estate agents. Okay, all right, it's everything. There are good doctors, there are bad doctors. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so there's good and bad in every profession and line of work, right? But if we take our job seriously as real estate brokers, it's not a nice thing to be a fiduciary. It's the law. It is the duty on the licensee. And I personally take that extremely seriously. And I always tell my clients, I go, look, you're a fiduciary to the estate. I'm a fiduciary to the estate and to you because
Mhm.
that's who I'm representing. I'm representing the asset essentially, right? I'm representing the person that is controlling this asset. And I have a duty to do my best and to hold the interests of all the people that are being touched by this asset to hold it above my own interests. Right. And
Right.
so that's the number one priority. Well, that's very different from some buyer in an arm's length transaction. They have no such duty, right? They have no duty to talk to you about its potential value, and it doesn't matter. They're not on the hook for anything. Versus for someone like myself, it's like, no, I'm coming in here looking at it from what is the best outcome? What is the goal here? Because there could be different goals. Now, I often believe that with my advanced strategies, we can get the most money in the least amount of time. But sometimes time is of utmost urgency for whatever reason, or there's a lot of different goals and things that are going on for the estate, and the strategy we use might be tailored to what is most important to what the estate needs.
Correct.
But I try to tell them, I go, look, I go, even when you pay me a commission, because I got, obviously we're not, I always tell people I'm running a business, but I'm
Mhm.
here to help you, right? I,
Right.
I get paid. I get paid when I accomplish my job. And if I do my job well, then you're going to recommend me. You're going to leave a good review. That's what I want. That's almost more important to me than anything else. So I'm like, okay, you're dealing with these guys, some guy. If you go on YouTube, they're always wearing a baseball cap and they're wearing a jersey, right? And
Yeah.
no one looks professional. They're on the phone. And by the way, Jesse, I'll tell you something interesting. Sorry, I'm going to riff here. Can you forgive me, Jesse? I'm going to
Ah,
riff a
yeah,
little
go
bit
ahead.
here. If you go on YouTube, and I want to invite you and anyone watching this, go to YouTube, type in investor probate. And there are these guys. They all look like frat house boys and they brag. They brag about slinging probate deals, getting it cheap, flipping the contract, not flipping the house, flipping the contract. I bought this deep. I dispoed it. I sold the contract. The house was worth $400,000. I got under contract for $300,000. I sold it for $320,000. I made $20,000. All I did was make a couple phone calls and sold the contract. And by the way, the actual estate executor or administrator, they often don't know what's going on. They don't know what an assignment is really. They don't know about, there's a technique called double closing, where it's like basically what they've done is they have basically wholesaled it, but they've created a simultaneous closing. So it's opaque. It's not clear exactly what's happened. It's legal, but the order of events, right? So it's happening all the time. And there's a lot of money in it. That's why all these letters are sent out, because there is a lot of money in that business. And I always say, look, I go, even when you pay, because sometimes it's a commission objection. And it's like, look, even when you pay a commission, if you sell this for 30% below value, it doesn't matter if you didn't pay a commission, didn't pay closing costs. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter because it's so low. It doesn't even matter at that point. So even paying someone, a good real estate broker like myself, to sell this property, you're going to make way more money. And guess what? You don't have to fix it up. This is my big problem with real estate agents, Jesse. And this is why, if I could say this, Jesse, this is why it's important to work with a real estate broker or agent that does probate, because the average real estate agent out here, if the house does not look pretty, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with it. And even they engage in practices which I believe are questionable, where I'll get emails all the time in my email. It's this house, it's an estate sale, and they're not putting it on the MLS. They're floating it in the realtor community, but they're not putting it on the MLS. And I'm like, why is this not? If I was selling my house and I wanted the world's best buyer to buy my house, would I not want every buyer on planet Earth to know that it's for sale and that they can call me and make an offer? Right. Why wouldn't I do that? But the problem is that even for a lot of agents, they're like, oh, well, I don't want it to, it's going to affect my image or something like that. But that's not the best thing for the client, right? That's not the best approach for the client. And that's the case with a lot of probate properties. Some are great.
Yeah, they're not in the best shape all the time.
Yeah. Exactly. I've sold some amazing. I sold this house in Dripping Springs one time that was in probate. Beautiful. It was massive lot, beautiful house. But a lot of these properties, the decedent was older, they weren't really thinking about the house. They're just trying to stay alive, Is it worth to put tens of $1,000s in the house to make a little bit more? Usually not. Yeah. So, you have to have the right strategies to sell those kinds of houses as well. Forgive me. I went on a tangent here, Jesse. I'm very passionate about this. This is this is why I'm in this business. This is why I have Texas Probate Real Estate. I'm very passionate about it. And if you read my reviews, you'll see my clients. I'm very passionate about this because we can do good for these clients. They need something a little special.
Exactly. Yes, I agree.
So let's go back. I want to go back to you, Jesse. I want to go back to when you're meeting a client. Can you walk me through a little bit of the procedural things that you're doing? What are those initial documents that you're drawing up? What are you drafting that you need to submit to the court?
Yeah, so every probate case starts with an application, whether it's an application to admit the will to probate and appoint an executor, or an application to determine heirship if there's no will, determine who the heirs are, and to appoint an administrator. There's different types of probates. There's muniment of title where, it's just about transferring real estate to a beneficiary named in the will. There's determining just the lawful heirs if there's no need to appoint an administrator. But it's all starts with the initial paperwork, and I get the information to prepare the paperwork. If the client has to sign it, then I'll get their signature, and that starts the entire process. Then we file a death certificate. If there's a will, we'll file the original will, and that kind of starts the clock on getting to the hearing, which is the first big step is getting to the hearing where, the administrator's appointed, the executor's appointed, and it's usually a quick hearing, but that's where the judge signs the order admitting the will or admitting the estate into probate. The executor or the administrator takes their oath, gets the letters of testamentary or letters of administration, which they'll need to handle the affairs of the estate. But initially, it's the initial paperwork. It's filing the applications to get the probate process started. Yeah.
What are some of the mistakes that people are making during this time in this part of the process? Are there common mistakes that people are making?
Not usually. If it's a mistake, it's usually because they didn't know. I have a couple of probate cases where, yeah, my brother died. He didn't have any kids, wasn't married. I'm the sole heir, but it turns out, there might have been a kid born, 20 years ago. Or we found a child support case that we found some paperwork where he was paying child support for a kid that we never knew existed. So that's why I said get as much information as you can before we get started. Because it could hold things up, it could complicate things. But usually it's just not having all the information. It's the mistake they have. And usually we can correct it, but it's better to get it done right the first time than having to amend a pleading or amend a filing.
I'll explore one topic with you that I've been kind of curious about, and I wonder if you could give us some enlightenment on this. So, we have independent and dependent administration with these probate estates. What are some of the factors that because I think most people would want an independent administration. It can, they can move quicker, they can, kind of make decisions. But, with these dependent administrations, the court's involved, there's scrutiny, maybe where you were filing for an independent administration of the estate, but the judge was like, nope, I want to do it through a dependent administration.
Yeah, if there's a will, if it's a properly done will and it provides for independent administration, then it's pretty simple. You just file the will, unless the executor can't serve or unless the executor's deceased and no one else is named, then it's pretty straightforward. Where it gets tricky is if there was no will and whether it's a child or the surviving spouse wants to be appointed an independent administrator just to get through the process. Like I said, most of the estates, it's just a house, maybe a bank account, a vehicle. It's not too complicated. But if it's a blended family where there's children from a prior marriage and they don't want stepmom acting as administrator, then if we have to get the consent of all the heirs to do an independent administration. And, a lot of times the surviving spouse will come in, yeah, they won't object. We'll just do an independent administration. They'll consent to it. They'll sign whatever they need to. I said, well, okay, let's do that. And then it turns out it's not the case. And a judge won't let you do an independent administration when there's no will unless all the heirs agree on that. And if they don't, then there's no choice. You have to do a dependent administration. If there's minor children involved and there's no will, a court won't do an independent administration. So those are some of the things that I ask about. Yeah.
Okay. Looking a little bit at kind of like the probate space, can you share with us some cases where, maybe someone could learn something from it, maybe a mistake they've made or a situation that could have been avoided? Like, if you could talk to someone, like, let's say, before they started this whole process, had they known certain things, this would have been avoided. Is there anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, get your estate plan drafted, preferably by an attorney. I know a lot of people get, their online, fill in the blank wills. A lot of times they're fine, but a lot of times there's issues. I've probated many do-it-yourself wills. I've probated, handwritten wills, and I think every single one of them had an issue that could have been avoided if it's done properly by an experienced attorney. The other thing is, consult with an attorney before you do anything related to real estate. A lot of people think, I can do a transfer on death deed or a ladybird deed, and it takes the home out of probate. I'll leave it to my 3 kids, and it's really the only thing I own, so no problem, no probate. But what if the 3 kids don't get along? Or what if they get along but wouldn't necessarily get along if they're co-owners of a house that's worth $300,000 or $400,000? One of them wants to live in the house, 2 of them want to sell the house. One of them has been paying the taxes on the house, the other 2 don't want to. What's going to happen? It just creates more conflict. Transferring ownership of a house to someone while you're still alive. I had a case where the home was owned by a mom and a sister, and another sister was going through a tough time, so they decided, we'll do something nice for her. We'll transfer part ownership of this house to the sister. We all live here anyway. But then the sister dies without a will. She didn't have any heirs, but the dad was maybe still alive, but she hadn't seen the dad in 40 years. We don't know if he's alive. We don't even know where he is. If he's deceased, does he have children? Because he's an heir of that estate. He owns part of that house now because his daughter died owning a part of that house. So it's just stuff like that just go to a professional first before you do any of that. To avoid, any kind of headaches later on the road.
I think estate planning is a little bit like life insurance. It's like we think that we kind of don't need it, and it's like usually we get it a little bit too late.
Yeah.
Why do you think people do not engage in estate planning?
Yeah, I think dealing with your own death, I think it's kind of it scares people away. They don't want to have to deal with it from, the emotional or the psychological standpoint. But a lot of it is just, well, my wife and I own everything. If I die, it just goes to her. But it's not necessarily the case. If I have kids from a prior marriage, if I own property before that we got married, if I inherit anything or if she inherits anything, and even if if it's all community property, it's all owned by the spouse, there still has to be some kind of step to, if it's a home, if it's real estate, to get that title out of the deceased person's name. So it's better to have something in place than not. No matter if you think you don't need it, it always comes out that you probably do need it. I've had clients that they did a will, just a do-it-yourself will that was perfectly fine. They didn't own anything. They sold, their home. They sold their vehicles. They're just renting an apartment. They have one bank account that has a POD on it, but they forgot that they had a life insurance policy that named, so-and-so as the beneficiary, but that person died. So they die owning this life insurance policy that's payable to the estate. Well, they have the will. They have a will in place. We probate the will, we collect that life insurance policy, and we can wrap it up pretty quickly. So even if you think you don't need it, it's not a lot of work to get a basic will done. Attorneys do them all the time. It doesn't take that long, doesn't cost that much, and it saves the family that the loved ones that you leave behind. That's why you do the estate plan. It's not for yourself; it's for the people that you leave behind, your loved ones.
I want you to I wanna I want to give you I wanna play devil's advocate, and I wanna
Okay.
give you an objection, and then I want you to handle the objection. I want you to be a salesperson for me for a moment,
Okay.
Jesse.
All right.
I could get my will done. I can do my will myself on LegalZoom for $100. Why do I not wanna do that?
You can, and it's better than having nothing. But again, there's things that might come up that you don't know about, that you don't anticipate, or that you don't know. I mean, like I said, I've had people that do their wills and distribute, only 80% of their property. They list beneficiaries. So and so gets 9%. So and so gets 9%, but they don't dispose of all their 100% of their estate. And if there's special situations, like I want to leave it to my kids, but I don't want them to get it, all at once. There's things that an experienced attorney can guide you through that you may not know if you just, fill in the blanks on a LegalZoom or a, do it yourself.
Think it through. It's so interesting to hear you talk about it because, I'm not an attorney, but I practice real estate, and we're filling blanks in on forms. But but those blanks, there's a lot of things that can happen in
That
those
can happen.
blanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a call before we got on here, and because I have a listing that has multiple offers on it, and I'm getting it's kind of a hotter property that I'm selling in South Austin. And he called me and he's like, hey, I want to see the house. And when someone calls me like that, I'm trying to pre-qualify. It's like, okay, are you working with an agent? Are you like, and sometimes they don't have an agent, which is okay. But I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, so you don't have an agent. I represent the seller, so I can't advise you
Uh-huh.
on what you're doing. Let's say you like the house. Are you going to write the contract? And then you can just there's silence, right? It's all of a sudden.
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Well, what if you like the house? I mean, I'm going to make you sign a paper that you don't have representation right now. But then you get there and you say, I like it. Now you want it. They didn't think about it. They didn't think it through,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
I've had some people they'll get the form because the Trek contract, I mean, you have to kind of like, it's not rocket science, but it's also like, if you've never saw it before, it's a little bit disorienting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and they look at it and they're just like, I mean, it's just like, it's like, yeah, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
Usually they change their
Yeah.
mind.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, that's why they had people like you. I mean, that's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But for like the will, it's interesting. You might know what you don't know. But the problem is you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't
Exactly.
know what you
Yeah.
don't know. When you don't know what you
Yeah.
don't know, you're in trouble, right? I think that's
Exactly. Yeah.
probably a lot with the will, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it could
Yeah.
be something as simple as just properly executing it. If it's not properly executed, it may not be a valid will. So
Right.
just something as simple and basic as an experienced attorney would know how to navigate through, so yeah.
Well, can you believe we've had an amazing episode here. We've been talking for quite some time. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot from your insights, Jesse.
I appreciate that.
Just before we kind of wrap it up, what's something that you really want to communicate to someone who is just at the beginning of the process or going through the process, or just you want the public to know? What would be your message? As someone, you're an experienced attorney, What do you want people to know out there?
Well, one, to get their estate plan in place. That's always important. And two, the probate process can be scary, it can be emotional, but that's why you have people like us, like you and me, to help them through that. And once they get through, they'll see it's not as stressful as I thought. So don't be afraid to reach out to an attorney to get this whole thing started. Because that's what we're here for, to help them through that, to relieve some of their stress about getting through the process, and to help them through the process as quickly, efficiently as possible. So
I love that. I
yeah.
love that so much.
Mhm.
Jesse, I want the entire world to know how they can get in touch with you. There's going to be someone watching this that probably is going to be like, you know what? I like Jesse's vibe. I want him to be my attorney, right? I think it's a lot of this. Yeah, when we're meeting people that we want to do business with, it's like, do I do I feel it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And someone might be like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling Jesse. I like Jesse. I want to do business with him. I want him to be my attorney. How can they get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, ramon-atxlaw.com. They can reach me by email at jesse@ramon-law.com. Yeah, those are the best ways to reach me. My number's it's my direct number. I can give it to you, 512-915-9195. That you can call me directly. You'll reach me. I may not answer the first time if I'm working on something, but I will get back to you. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk to anybody that has a probate case, an estate planning case that they I'm not quite sure about, but I can talk to them and hopefully help them out.
Love that. Again, I want to point out that is the benefit of working with someone like you, right? Here's my number. I'm going to answer the phone, right?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
goes to me. It
Yeah.
goes to me. So I love that. I love that so much. Jesse, we're going to definitely promote your information in our
Thank
show
you.
notes, and and we're going to make sure that we have your website there and phone number so people
Excellent.
can
Thank you.
contact you. Jesse, I hope to have you on the show again in the future. And again, I want to thank you so much, for especially with the attorneys, the most valuable thing is your time. There's probably nothing more valuable. You're very busy working with your clients. So thank you so much. I really
No,
appreciate you
thank
coming
you. I
on.
really appreciate it. And I do a lot of probate, and I have a lot of clients that could definitely use your services, and I'll be directing them your way. Definitely.
Awesome. Awesome. I
Yeah,
look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
And
Thank you.
just as we're wrapping up, I want to thank all of our listeners and all of our viewers on YouTube. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Texas Probate Real Estate Podcast. Again, my name is Jeremy Kritt. I am the owner and broker of Kritt Real Estate, founder of Texas Probate Real Estate, and I do business all over Central Texas, all the way from Temple Belton, all the way to San Antonio. I work that whole area. I'm helping clients right now, currently, all throughout all of those areas. And if you are looking for help selling real estate and probate, give me a call. All of my information is in the show notes. And just look up Jeremy Kritt, Texas Probate Real Estate. And don't forget to call Jesse if you're in the market for an attorney. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. See you
thank
on the
you.
next one.